Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and if it is your first time joining us, welcome. I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremiah Twissia. How are we?
Jeremiah. That's one that's come up a little bit recently, Jeremiah, and it's a shout out to those that have watched The Summer I Turned Pretty. I'm not sure if you've watched that, Ilan, with your girlfriend Rachel, but The Summer I Turned Pretty, there's a character in there and his name is Jeremiah. So that's why you threw me a little bit off guard there with the whole Jeremiah, because it's something that seems to be coming up a little bit now as a side point.
Do people call you that because they believe you resemble Jeremiah's characteristics?
Well, God, no, I would absolutely hope not, but more so just because my name is Jeremy, and so Jeremiah sometimes gets thrown into the equation. So
fair enough.
Hopefully that's the only reason why.
I just thought it rolled off the tongue, hence why I called you that. I have no affiliation with that show. I have never watched it, and I don't play
I started watching it with my girlfriend Linoy, and we got about how long did we get in? We didn't even complete. Yeah, I think we just started the second season, and there was like a fair few, maybe even like 5 seasons or something, and we just like binged it.
Is there a theme of people going for the wrong people in that show?
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Funnily enough, yes. And this is why we've chosen to talk about it, because it's a very common thing that we see happen time and time again. And I'm actually surprised we haven't discussed this issue yet on the potty, because it's very much a potty-worthy topic, isn't it?
One of the biggest things I've learnt in my studies as a future-to-be psychologist is that a lot of people will come to therapy because of the issues in their relational circles. Now, not really a big surprise, but then you kind of realize a lot of people present with similar concerns. They're attracted to people that they know aren't good for them. And they know this on a fully conscious level. Because to me, and I think to most people, logically, we then ask ourselves, well, then why do you go for that person? Don't the cons outweigh the pros? And those people know that they do, but they'll still go down that rabbit hole.
They still do it, and they still do go down that rabbit hole. And the funny thing is, you often hear them just joking about it as well. Commonly from girls, at least in my circle, I can't really recall being around blokes that say, "Oh, I'm just going for the wrong girls." I know it does happen. It does happen. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think it's more commonly heard amongst girls saying that. Girls saying, "I just keep going for the wrong guys," or "I'm just attracting the wrong guys." That's where I hear it more of, and they kind of joke about it, but there is a lot of meaning and truth behind it, and that's what we want to dive into today.
Yeah. So, truthfully, it happens amongst boys and girls. Maybe it presents a little bit differently for guys and girls. I'm not sure what the differences are. What I do know is if you're an adult and you're consistently attracted to the people that you know aren't good for you, but you still keep going back, you are trying to resolve an unresolved script in your childhood. And it's probably something to do with your interactions with your earliest caregivers.
So we're going back to childhood trauma here.
We're going back to potential childhood trauma. We're going back to how you related to mum and dad. Was mum and dad present for you? Were they neglectful, or were they satiating your most primitive needs? See how that might be important? Let's say you're my dad and you've left me when I'm, 2-3 years old, and maybe my mum's still in the picture and she's physically present, but she's not emotionally present, right? What happens then? Well, I learned that my caregivers aren't reliable. What happens then? My attachment style forms, and I might become a little bit more avoidant because I learned that I can't rely on others. I'm only going to rely on myself. So fast forward 15, 20 years, I start dating people. What happens? I might become really hyper independent. I might be like, if anyone shows me an ounce of attraction, I might be like, ew, you're too clingy, because I'm confident and way more comfortable dating someone who reminds me of someone that is familiar to me. Because think about it, when you're 8 months old and you can't code anything on a pure cognitive level, your cognitively goes out the window, but what you are coding things on are on an emotional level. So that becomes familiar. So you end up attracting things that feel familiar, familial, and comfortable to you.
Yeah, and just to interject there, because I think it's really important for us to preface that by us talking about the potential childhood trauma or the potential childhood exposure as to why you may attract certain people in your love life, it's actually erasing the blame in this scenario. So it's not coming from a position of, because this happened to you, you are therefore making these choices. It's actually the complete opposite. It's actually saying, because these things might have happened to you, or you have experienced these things in your early childhood that you weren't even conscious of. You couldn't even consciously choose this life for you. You weren't even able to consciously comprehend what was happening. Therefore, it's not your fault that you might be potentially picking the wrong people, or the people that aren't good for you. It's actually not your fault. But what is in your control is actually acknowledging this, and therefore responding to it. I was going to say reacting to it, but not reacting to it, rather responding to it. But acknowledging that this situation is happening. Why? Because of what my exposures were potentially early on in childhood. That is step number one, and then responding to that accordingly. And it's not your fault that these things were happening, because you weren't even conscious of it. You weren't conscious of how love was affecting you, how love was being perceived, how love was being acted when you were so young.
100%. I always say something might not be your fault, but it can be your responsibility.
Yes, absolutely.
And what I mean by that is, if you're that child, thing is, a child can't if mum and dad isn't there to soothe you when you're a child, in your little teeny weeny brain, you're not thinking, oh, they're just making a cup of tea. You're thinking, they don't want to be around me, therefore my parents aren't going to be able to satiate my needs. So they discriminate you as either good or bad. If you're there for me, you're great. If you're not, you're bad. And the problem is, if you're such a young child and you've been developed in such a system where you can't have your needs met, how do you think that permeates into adulthood? Yeah, you can be really super cognitive and super aware that you've landed yourself in another relationship where someone is actually giving you the love that you believe you deserve, because that's what happens. If I'm a child and I'm not getting this love, what do you think I then expect? That I'm worthless potentially, that the love I receive from people isn't, I'm not even worthy of that love. So what happens is, when you're in the dating game, people are going to treat you the way that you believe you deserve to be treated, right?
Which is so subconscious sometimes, isn't it?
It's majorly unconscious. And that's why I have a lot of...
Unconscious,
Yeah, a lot of empathy for those people who land themselves in those dysfunctional relationships. Because I don't think they're going out with the plan of being like, I'm going to date someone who resembles all the negative characteristics of my dad or my mother. No one goes into dating thinking like that. What they think is, I'm attracted to this person on a pure primitive level potentially, and there's something familial about them. And, say that person did have abandonment wounds. There's a part of them which is almost called like a mastery wish, and this all happens on like an unconscious level. They think this might be the one time that I can resolve the issues that maybe mum or dad had left for me. I can resolve the script of them abandoning me, and perhaps my persistent bids for closeness will actually be met with love this time, and I can close that chapter. So sometimes it's this unconscious wish, but the problem is it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, right? If I'm consistently going for the same people who are going to treat me like shit, and then they are always going to leave, what do I interpret that as? All the people in my life, regardless of what I do, they're going to leave me anyway. And then that cycle continues and continues, and that's where you end up in therapy generally.
Well, that would often be the right step forward, yeah? And that's where the acknowledgement comes, is to acknowledge that this is happening. It's a repeat thing that might be happening, and I need to do something about it. So with that, we've honestly fast-tracked a little bit there to what the solution might be, but I want to take it back and get us thinking, because you might be listening to this episode and thinking, this does seem like me. This seems like a very familiar thing where I've dated guys in the past, or I've dated girls in the past that have repeatedly not been good for me. And what that means is they're actually just bringing me down as a person. They're not bringing me up as a person. And I'm starting to acknowledge that now. As that person, is it as simple as just going to get therapy? And what if I don't even want to go get therapy? Can I resolve this issue by taking it in my own hands and just approaching my dating differently?
Look, anything's possible. You could probably be an incredibly self-aware person and be like, because of this childhood issue, this is why I date the people that I do. But that's a very incredibly difficult task to do. And even psychologists get their own therapy to figure out their own relational issues. So no one's immune from that. I always believe that everyone's got their own blind spots. That's why I think therapy can be beneficial for most people. With that being said, I always like to think that the solution is way more simple than we think. If we strip all the emotions away and we treat ourselves like robots, and I'm not saying that we do this, the solutions tend to be way more clear cut. I would encourage anyone who has, let's say, got on therapy, figured out their maladaptive relational patterns, I would encourage them to sit with the discomfort and sit with it for a while. And what I mean by that is, let's say this person is actually dating someone who is a genuinely good person. Let's say you're a female, you're a girl, you're a woman, and you've had really poor partners in the past, and you've got some emotional wounds left from incompetent parents, let's say. And you're dating this really, really good guy, and you know what? He actually treats you well. And it's unfamiliar, so it gives you this sense of anxiety.
You get scared. Oh, I'm not used to this.
And of course, would anyone blame you? No, and you shouldn't be blamed for that. But let's say something happens, like they go out to a party, right? And maybe they text you all the time, or they're out with their friends, and they're not texting you as much. And you might get this insatiable level of anxiety within you. And you're an avoidant, remember? Like, you want to reject them before they reject you. So you get really super upset that they haven't messaged you whilst they've been out with their friends. And you get this impulse to be like, I've got to text them saying, I'm really hurt. Fuck you. I'm done with this relationship. What am I doing there? I'm rejecting you before you can reject me.
It's like a power imbalance,
but
isn't it?
But notice that could be your default response.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is, notice all your default responses whilst you're sitting with that anxiety. And then think of the most alternative response and see what it would be like to experiment with that. So what I mean by that is you have to actually set yourself a little bit of experimental work for this to work. Because the thing is, if you just continue along with your default responses, nothing's actually going to change. You're going to still feel that level of anxiety. But what you can do is you can start shifting the narrative a little bit. Because let's say you did respond in your default way and say, you know what, this is done. Great, that relationship's over, and you're probably going to attract someone who actually isn't good for you in your next relationship rounds. But let's say you wrote something like, hey, I'm a little bit upset that you haven't spoken to me. Will that break the relationship? Maybe not. But guess what? It's a bit of a different response. That person might not just leave you straight away. They might be like, hey, why are you upset? And perhaps it invites an element of vulnerability from you where you're like, well, you know, usually when people don't text me for a while, I usually interpret it as they're going to leave me. And that guy could be like, oh, I just didn't have my phone on me, really. Like, I don't really text people that much. But that's not a default response for that woman. But already you start shifting that little mechanism within you. Now, is it something that can be fixed overnight? No, this would take a lot of neural rewiring. This could take years. But the alternative is you get stuck in the same relational maladaptive patterns. So it's worth the experiment.
Absolutely. And I think knowing that it is just about neural rewiring, like you've mentioned there, is comforting to know, because it's comforting to know in the sense that you aren't built this way and you therefore cannot change. Like, you absolutely can change your behaviors. You can change the type of person you are in the sense of how you respond to certain behaviors and how you react differently when similar opportunities arise or similar situations arise. So just like that example there, if you know that you're typically someone who would be very impulsively reactive in that scenario, you know that you would just kick the can and say, fuck this, like they're not responding to me, I just want to jump out of this relationship. If you know that you're that person, take a moment and respond differently, or just take a moment and rather than responding right then in that moment like you might have the urge to do, like you always would do, take a deep breath and respond later. Come back to it later when you're ready, or even the next day, whenever it might be. But just that first step of recognizing, I would normally respond now in a certain way and I'm choosing not to do that. Pat yourself on the back for that, because that is already a great step forward of acknowledging. And just like you mentioned there about the neural rewiring, that's already kickstarting that rewiring. So it's just a matter of reps, isn't it? It's just a matter of repetition of doing those things enough in order to therefore snap out of that. And we said, you know, going to therapy, and that's where therapy would often help with a lot of these situations. It would often encourage people to change these behaviors. But, you know, hopefully, you know, we don't say this in terms of trying to be a replacement for therapy, not at all. But these are just the solutions and the patterns that hopefully you guys, if you feel like you relate to this, can start doing in order to change these habits of yours, rather than just maybe jumping the gun and thinking that you need to jump into a therapy room straight away.
Yeah, look, I'll be honest. I think most of the work here is more awareness. Because usually the people who struggle with this are the ones who lack the awareness of why this sort of thing happens in your dating life. And what I mean by that is, if you are super aware, the chances of you recreating the same relational patterns is far less likely to occur.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's this element of fresh air that you get. You can actually breathe because you're like, oh, so this is why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Is this why I'm attracted to the guy that always treats me like a piece of shit? And the thing is, I feel like as humans, we can, and I'm definitely guilty of this. We feel like we know it all. We feel like we know ourselves, but the reality is the reason things are deemed as unconscious is because they're not in our conscious awareness. We can't actually access it, right? So if I ask you what a conscious or a pre-conscious thought is, if I asked you like, oh, what did you have for dinner last night? That's in your pre-conscious. Like, you're probably not just thinking about it, but you can access that information with a prompt. An unconscious thing is something that's been it's in your psyche, it's been pushed so deep that it comes out in weird ways. Some people say it might come out in your dreams. Some people might say it comes out in like the implicit ways that you behave in relationships. But therapy is what's usually helpful in this case to kind of illuminate those patterns, because those patterns, you've got a blind spot. You're not seeing them clearly. And once you have a little bit more awareness, it does a lot of the work. It's different and it's similar but different in, like, let's say you're addicted to drugs, or you're addicted to cigarettes, for example. As we said, a lot of the neural underpinnings in your brain all say, nicotine's great, I'm going to keep smoking cigarettes. And guess what? When you don't have a cigarette for a while, it's the same thing. You have to learn to sit with that anxiety. You have to learn to sit with the cravings. You have to learn to sit with the withdrawal until your brain and your body learns that, hey, it's actually safe to not have this drug of choice that we've been so addicted to. This is a little bit different because I feel like there's this element of agency that isn't so neurochemical. Like, you can choose to keep entertaining. Like, you're not going to have withdrawal by not going for the bad boy, right? You just might be like, oh, being with this good guy just feels weird because it's not what I'm used to. I'm used to the highs and lows. I'm used to being told I'm the worst person in the world and then next week having the best intimacy with them. So it's getting really clear on those things. And I think if you can start to do that, it becomes heaps easier. But yeah, as I said, like, not everyone needs therapy, but it can be bloody useful. Yeah,
and look, we spoke there about getting comfortable with the moments of recognizing what you would normally do in terms of your reaction. We spoke very much there about how you would react to certain scenarios, sitting with the discomfort of that, and then reacting differently. The same goes the other way in terms of receiving. That's very much giving and getting comfortable with how to give differently to scenarios, how to react differently, how to behave differently. So the same goes as well for you to actually be the receiver in the scenario. And you alluded to it before in the sense of maybe being used to someone that does treat you bad, being used to men that don't give you the respect and the love that you deserve and the honesty that you deserve, or that you deserve, but you're not used to that. But when you do come across, for example, a good guy, a guy that is treating you well, a guy that is making an effort with you, that is making you feel safe, that is making you feel secure, and this just feels absolutely foreign to you. Just like that cigarette analogy, it feels foreign. You're not used to this feeling, and it's making you feel uncomfortable. Even though in your mind you know it's healthy, it's making you feel uncomfortable. You need to get good at recognizing how to receive that, feel the discomfort, and feel it enough until you actually do feel comfortable after all. Because that discomfort will only become comfortable after a certain amount of exposure, a certain amount of repetition. So it's important we talk about that, because we always think about discomfort as a negative thing. But discomfort can also present with healthy scenarios, with scenarios where you feel safe, where you feel secure. It's like what's the saying about the devil you know is the devil you know is way more comfortable than the devil you don't know. Like exactly. So it's basically saying that you're used to something even if it's bad for you, the sense of feeling used to that thing, even though it is bad for you, is safer and nicer versus something that might be good for you because it is foreign for you. And we often see that presenting with drug addiction. You know, people will go and still do their drug activities and still shoot up even if they know it is bad for them, but because that is what they're used to, and that's the safety of feeling comfortable in that scenario, they still do it even though they know it's bad. And it presents the same way with relationships here, with dating people. It presents the exact same way. So that's what we're alluding to.
Yeah,
after
essentially,
all.
It's your homeostasis, right?
Yeah.
It's your level of physiologically being normal. But with that, and I'm going to go back to what I said before. It is still your responsibility, right? Like, do you want to keep recreating those old relational patterns? And I don't think you do. I don't think many people do. Now, I always think about this as well. It's like, if you want to have kids one day and you want to model what a healthy relationship is, chances are you don't want to model a relationship with your kids that you had with your own parents, right? So if your parents ended up not satiating any of your early emotional needs, and then you end up dating someone who is hot and cold with you, but you end up having kids with them, what kind of example of a functional relationship are you setting for your kids? And now this is assuming you want kids, but say you do, you kind of have to also be forward focused. And a lot of times when we really struggle as humans to do things that are good for us, but sometimes the best motivators are things that future you might thank you for, or other people would thank you for, right? It's like, we're way more willing to do something nice for a friend than we are for ourselves. So I would encourage people, be kind to yourself. Let yourself know and imagine that you're meant for more. Because the things, you might have this core belief that you're unlovable, that you're not meant for more, that you're not meant for this amazing sort of love. Now, Matthew Hussey talks about this actually, and he says, you can't just kind of change that core belief by saying, well, just believe that you are lovable. You got to have some sort of evidence. And you know, any lifestyle coach, psychologist will tell you the exact same thing. You can't just try and will it. You have to make it happen through a reference point. And guess what? You don't need a lot of evidence. You just need a little bit to bounce off. So perhaps that could look in practical terms. Let's say every guy who is a good guy that you end up not talking to after a week, you ditch because it just feels too, unsettling that they're so nice to you. What if you see them for a week longer?
Lean into it. Lean into that discomfort again.
Dude, a 1 week longer, that's already 50% or 100% more, or double whatever you were doing in terms of the time frame you originally say these people for. 2 weeks, amazing. And look, if it doesn't work out, but there's your reference point. You can stay in those situations longer than you think.
You mentioned it there about modeling what you would want it to look like for your future children. And the same goes for this scenario. If you find yourself constantly dating people that bring you down, that make you feel like shit, that you know aren't good for you, I think a really good way to almost try to kickstart and snap out of this from happening to you is to think about your future kids one day, if you do want children one day, and to think to yourself, would I be happy with my son or my daughter dating the person that I am currently dating? Would I be really content with that? Would that make me feel safe being a mother or a father to know that my child is dating the person that I'm currently with, their behaviors, their characteristics, this personality type? If your answer is no, or if your answer not even is no, but if you have to hesitate to answer that question, then I feel like the writing is on the wall then and there for you. If it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. If you have to stumble and think about, yeah, look, I'm not sure if I'd be happy with my daughter dating the type of guy that I'm dating. If that's even a hesitation in your mind, then you are dating the wrong person, and you might know that deep down, and that might be really scary and really overwhelming to start to think about, but it's a great litmus test in order to start deconstructing what is going on in this relationship and whether it is right for you. Because if you wouldn't, like you said before, Ilan, you wouldn't we often treat ourselves not as nicely as we would treat our friends, and putting a lens on it from either the lens of like a friend or the lens of like your future child, that is really good at waking up the system as to what you should do yourself in terms of your response here.
Completely agree. And before kind of we finish, what we've spoken about are really sometimes the more extreme examples of how your relationships with parents can actually manifest in maladaptive relational patterns in the future. But another one, and you said this is the one you see more amongst men, because you said before, guys and girls are different in terms of how these relational patterns present. For guys, what isn't uncommon, and I'm not sure what the studies are on this, but let's say you're a guy and in relationships, every girl has told you, you never open up, you're never vulnerable with me. Where do you think that stems from, right? That stems from the fact, probably, it's plausible that when they were younger, maybe the first time they showed emotion, maybe the first time they expressed sadness or vulnerability, they got shunned. Maybe it was met with a negative reaction. So what does that person learn? That person learns that it's unsafe to be vulnerable. It's unsafe to express what I want in the context of a relationship. Now that person, it becomes unconscious. But let's say you're in that relationship with someone and they're like, you never tell me that you love me, or you never tell me how much you care about me, or I never see like another emotional side to you. Why do you think that happens? So I think something to always remember is if you are dating someone and they're doing something that just irks you, and I'm not saying you have to put up with it, but something that's useful to ask is, what is the reason they're doing that? Because that has to have developed from somewhere, right? Think about the people who are constantly nice to you, or they're nice to everyone, and you just know it's fucking fake. That has to have evolved from somewhere. Do I blame that person? No, not at all. What I am curious about is that behavior has to have evolved somewhere from childhood. It has to have a functional use to it. And I think that's a nice kind of note to leave. What is more of a deeper potty, but I was keen on putting the psych hat on today. I've got to be honest.
Yeah. Look, there definitely is a lot of psych involved here, but you know, if we can expose people to this way of thinking, then I think it'll make us all better when it comes to our relationships, our friendships, our connections, human to human. So hopefully you guys have found this useful. If you do have any questions, our DMs are always open. Send this to someone that you think might benefit from this as well. And if you guys are enjoying these episodes, please do leave us a rating, because it does help us on Spotify to get the word out there to more people like you that are as like-minded as us, and that are as curious as us as well. On that note, happy Tuesday and have a good week.